Welcome to New Cyber Frontier, bringing you the latest news on cybersecurity and the local Colorado economy, focused on cybersecurity industry growth and initiatives that support cybersecurity economics. We hope this special series on blockchain builds your excitement for a possible future which empowers individual privacy. Please follow and participate as New Cyber Frontier is supporting a grassroots community effort to empower the individual in the digital age. Check out privacyforthepeople.org to see the upcoming crowdfunding campaign. Now sit back and enjoy as we introduce our great guest for today's show.
Today, this is Abe Thompson from New Cyber Frontier. We're podcasting from the SecureSet studios here in Colorado Springs. And I started with that unique greeting because today we have the privilege all the way from Australia of Mr. Martin Haak, who's on board. He's the founder of Infinite Edge. Great to have you on the program, my friend.
Thanks for having me, Abe.
Indeed. And via technology, welcome to the US of A. So how's your winter going, I guess?
Very cold.
Oh, lovely. Cold. Yeah, we had over 100 degrees Fahrenheit here last week. And I forget my conversions to Celsius. I don't know.
Well, that's all right. I'm a bit of a barbecue fan, so I understand.
Lovely. That's excellent. Excellent. So, Martin, tell us a little bit about your journey and kind of where you're sitting now in the cybersecurity industry.
Yeah, so I guess the choice to move sort of into more of the cybersecurity side of things was it sort of come from a bit of a passion in the area. My particular passion is the human behavioural and cultural side.
Excellent.
In organisations. I was once upon a time I was a tech, but that's less of my focus these days. I really find an absolutely fascinating looking at the side of the human side of it.
It's interesting. I've run into several people with a background in organizational psychology and interest in human behaviors. So it is quite an up-and-coming component of our industry. A good friend of mine here and one of my instructors at SecureSet, Dr. Eric Huffman, has spoke quite often on the psychology of cybersecurity. Is that similar to some of your areas of interest?
Absolutely. So I always had a fascination and an interest in psychology growing up. I actually gave it a go and did a degree. Well, started a degree,
sure,
but was bitterly disappointed. Wasn't quite what I was expecting, and I didn't finish it. But I still have the interest in psychology. So.
Sure. Well, and it wraps in obviously in our industry, wanting to understand the motivations and the mentalities and the ideologies and the behavior of some of those folks on the network and whether they be adversaries or not. So how did you kind of arrive to where you are and create this niche?
Well, I guess for me, what I've realized in the research that I've done and real life experience is that the cybersecurity, both from our industry, from the IT industry, and from the actual users themselves that we look after, there's traditionally been it's an approach or an angle from a computer science perspective, I suppose, and people think that it is a technology problem. And I think the challenge that we have as well in Australia, because for us, we're actually quite far behind you guys over there. It's a relatively new thing for a lot of businesses and organizations, and the majority of them, I would say, still don't really understand what their requirements are or what it even is. There's a lot of fear, and they don't really do enough about it. And again, it's that whole they think it's a tech problem, and their eyes glaze over, and they don't want to know, like they do with most IT things, and it's they just go about their business. So.
Yeah, and that can certainly be disheartening to a cybersecurity professional that's trying to communicate to their leadership the need for all this and to have them kind of fall asleep on you at the table or ignore your warnings and your pleas. Yeah, that could certainly put a damper on things. So what are you hoping to see accomplished there in Australia to turn the tide?
Well, so the way I look at it is, it starts for most people. It starts as ignorance, and
Mm-hmm.
ignorance is bliss, as we all know.
Oh yeah.
Uh, and then once they become aware of it and they're not doing anything about it, it's negligence. So, and that's sort of, I think that's where we're at this stage with a lot of people, a lot of organisations in Australia, and that ignorance turns to shame, and then that shame turns to fear, and people are overwhelmed. They don't know where to start. They don't know who to talk to. They don't know what their requirements are, and it's all just too much. So it essentially paralyzes them into inaction. So
Well, that's a very vivid sort of description of the problem. Let's take a quick break and go hear from our sponsors.
Cyber Resilience Institute helps build strong cyber communities designed to prevent members from attack. Like building a neighborhood watch, it takes coordination and a sharing community to protect our identities and valuables in the virtual world. Typically, we hear that organizations know they need to do something to protect their cyber assets, but don't know where to begin. Let Cyber Resilience Institute help your community create an action plan. Cyber Resilience Institute will build your community or business marketplace so that it is designed to support a collective cyber defense. Contact them for more information at cyberresilienceinstitute.org.
And this is Abe Thompson back with New Cyber Frontier from the SecureSet studios here in Colorado Springs. And I have on the program Mr. Martin Haak from Australia. And he's just, Martin, you've just taken me through this really eloquent sort of description of the stages that people go through in the cybersecurity problem, from ignorance to sort of shame to fear to being overwhelmed. Continue that for me, if you would. Very fascinating.
Yeah, so, and once people are at the fear stage, I think that's where the industry professionals have, I suppose, tried to leverage that fear and use fear-mongering to try and sell cybersecurity solutions. And the problem I see with that is that when people may well buy out of fear, but they're buying out of fear because they have to, not because they want to. And you want your customers to buy because they want to,
right?
Or your good customers to buy because they want to. And if we're going to make a difference worldwide and make cybersecurity a forethought, not an afterthought, I think we need to get people to actually care.
Yeah, I actually love it, and it it makes quite a bit of logical sense, and it really forced a lot of people in the industry, I think, to restructure their business practices. And do you have much interface with sort of the Ministry of Defense side of things there in Australia, and how they're addressing the cybersecurity problem?
No, unfortunately, not this stage. We have recently signed up to we have the Australian Cybersecurity Centre here in Australia, and in each capital city or in each major city, there's the Joint Cybersecurity Centre, and on the back of the I guess they're not so recent anymore, but they weren't that long ago. There was a number of MSP hacks over in the US, I think it was as well, and as well as in Australia. And on the back of that, the government decided that who's looking at the MSPs? So they started this program where they want to partner with MSPs and offer a framework, I suppose, and for us to be able to work side by side with them and to be able to share insights and knowledge, as well as then getting our customers themselves to sign up to this program, so that they can not only work within a framework that's provided for them, but they can also hold us accountable as MSPs to make sure we're doing nothing.
And I like the accountability piece, and that's kind of what you're identifying here. I mean, you've highlighted the issue that perhaps there are professionals in the cybersecurity industry that are really manipulating people and leveraging fear rather than gaining real buy-in. So there's, rewriting of business plans, like I said. And so how do we walk it back and rebuild credibility and trust with our future and prospective customers? How do we kind of start over, or do we have to?
Well, so the way my approach has been, and I'm getting a bit of traction with this, is I say to people, look, it's okay to be where you are. You don't know any different.
Right.
And let's just start with one thing.
Okay.
And it's more of that, we're here to help. We're not here to judge. I think there's also an element for people that shame means that they don't even want us to put it in a to essentially peek under the kimono, as someone said to me recently.
Yep.
Because they're ashamed of what we might find. So it's and that's what I want to try and bridge that gap. I want to try to make them feel that it's okay. It doesn't matter what state they're in at this stage. It's okay because we can improve that for them, and we can just start with one thing at a time.
Well, I like the sound of it too. It's almost like a grace-based approach. Hey, this is where we are.
Yeah.
Because obviously professionals are going to get defensive or put up walls if they hear that, maybe they're taking advantage of folks or whatever. So yeah, I love it. How do you see that taking effect? You say start with one thing, but how do you see it kind of taking effect to shift paradigms across the industry?
Yeah, it's a good question. I think again, it's this is actually, I guess, based on the recent post that a colleague of mine put on LinkedIn, and it got quite a lot of engagement internationally as well as nationally from cybersecurity experts, and that is that we should be working more together. Sure. What this person pointed out is that there is a lot of criticism and what we call, I don't know if you're familiar with the phrase, the tall poppy syndrome. Which is quite rife here in Australia. Essentially, we cut people down who have success, rather than encouraging them and celebrating their success. We cut them down. It's quite common in Australia, but that's a whole other topic in itself. Why that is the case, but I think that the point of this was to say, look, instead of criticizing each other and cutting each other down, we should be working together. It's hard enough as it is for us to get our customers to engage and to get them to adopt the good cybersecurity practices. We should be working more together and learning from each other, and not just looking within our country, but looking overseas to see what other successes cybersecurity professionals have had overseas, where they're getting a bit more traction than we are here.
Sure. Well, definitely, we would probably have some different idioms to describe that, but that tall poppy syndrome, as you talk about it, is equally common here, and I think it shows its ugly face in the form of sort of an uber competitive approach where I'll undercut other people's success so that mine can succeed, or at least nobody can do well, and sort of the opposite of that. And one of the terms we've tried to really embrace here in Colorado Springs, and I think in other areas that have a strong cybersecurity component, is the cybersecurity ecosystem. And as you remember from our early science classes, that ecosystem is one of dependency on one another, from moving forward of the entire system, and so I love your approach, and I love honestly to any effort that would be involved in attacking sort of that mentality. I want to kind of remove that, because a lot of different areas of culture, someone's successful, there's other people that are envious, and so instead of celebrating, they tear down.
Yeah, and to elaborate on your question before, what other changes could we make? Because my focus and my passion's on the cultural and behavioural side, I've been having discussions with people in the leadership or people in culture sort of industries, human resources, because they're already working with organisations or within organisations around culture, and I thought it might be a really good synergy between us, and if we could add cybersecurity to their knowledge and their teachings and the work that they do, I think that would make a huge difference.
Well, and you're absolutely right in terms of adding it to the body of knowledge. I've had people on the program that have advocated for sort of a discontinuation of this idea of a cybersecurity department, because really, cybersecurity belongs in every industry, just like behavior awareness belongs in every segment of the industry, in every department in an organization. This isn't just an HR problem, right, in an organization. It's, so there's some intertwining of disciplines here. I like that approach for sure.
Yeah, and I had this discussion with another colleague not too long ago, and who's a cybersecurity expert for small businesses, and we were discussing whether or not the term cybersecurity itself is polarizing, because it's people, again, it's that the term cyber, they think automatically technology, and whereas really it's and he put it really well and said it's really business process security, because it affects every process across an organization, and maybe the term itself needs to be recoined.
Interesting. Well, and that's going to get people's attention too. When you say business process security, your CFO is going to sit up and your COO is going to acknowledge and say, well, wait a minute, that's in my realm, and and your answer is darn tootin'. It absolutely is. Let's just take a quick break and hear from our sponsor.
Murray Security Services are your cybersecurity experts with decades of experience providing professional training services for our clients in various industries. We offer professional training and certification in areas of cybersecurity, safety, health, and environmental services at our academy. Our in-person and online training provides a collaborative environment where students can interact directly with instructors through live chats or in private classrooms. Visit murraysecurityservices.com for more information.
Hello, this is Abe Thompson back with new Cyber Frontier from the SecureSet Studios here in Colorado Springs. On our program today, all the way from freezing Australia, is Martin Haak. How are you, my friend?
Going well. Although you probably can't really say it's freezing, because compared to the temperatures you guys get, it's not that cold, but it's cold for us.
We've had a bizarre set of this entire year. Actually, the weather's been strange. We had a blizzard on May 21st, the day before I believe my children were supposed to be done with school for the summer. So it's been quite all over the place. So Martin, you had identified this. Perhaps a need to recoin the term for our industry because of the risk of cybersecurity being polarized. How do you do that?
I wish I had the answer to that. And again, look, I'm not sure if I'm not sure how that would work. And look, it's an interesting discussion. And I'm not saying it's totally necessary, but It is. I think the point with any of this is that it raises a discussion.
Yeah.
And I think if we're raising a discussion and we're getting people to talk about it, that's exactly what we want.
Yeah, and
because
it bears consideration. Yeah, absolutely.
Absolutely. And not just industry professionals, not people within the industry, not just people within the industry. I think the problem is that, you and I can sit here and talk about it. I talk about it all the time with colleagues and peers, but the conversations aren't happening enough with our customers and organizations, and that's really what I want to change.
Well, and even different segments inside the organization. You've already alluded to HR, and I mentioned sort of the non-technical folks in the C-suite. The chief financial officers and those types of folks. So yeah, there's conversations internal and external to organizations that perhaps we rescue the term, but it's really just ensuring that we've minimized the polarization that comes with it. Now, you talk about that, and so do you think that the glazing over and whatnot is still more common in Australia because you say the industry's a bit behind, say, some of the other places in the tech world?
Yeah, I think so. I think look, I've had a few different analogies, I suppose, around it. Someone said to me that they likened it to after the war when kids used to walk into school with gas masks
Oh,
because that
yeah.
was just what you did, and
Sure.
it was part of the life, I suppose, in the time,
Wow.
and at the moment. It's so, like I said, it's so new for organizations, but there will be a time where everyone is aware of it, and it is just something that all of us do,
Sure.
um, or have to do, unfortunately. And this is the thing. I think it's going to get the most traction and the most results if people want to do it. And I think if to make that sort of a difference, you have to start in schools, and
Sure.
kids have to be taught these things. So, I've got two young kids. One's about to start school next year,
Hmm.
and I know that they get taught technology from an early age, but there's still not enough education around cyber awareness and these what to look out for, what to do, what's a phishing attack. This stuff should be taught from very early on because, like I said, it has to be a forethought. It has to be part of their behavior online.
Yeah, it has to be intrinsic.
Absolutely.
We've started even in the United States here getting a lot more focused here recently on pushing down cybersecurity preparation into the, as we would call it, grades kindergarten through 12, K-12 here. And I know the systems are a little bit different, but those early grammar school years, those primary years, there's no reason why they can't begin to explore such that, because we also, and you would probably appreciate this from your discipline, we need to sort of implement the ethical ramifications of cybersecurity, and how kids can naturally and intrinsically know about protecting themselves and being safe, because there's plenty of threats that go after our kiddos for sure.
Absolutely, and that's a good segue, I suppose,
Mm-hmm.
because one of the issues that we find and the feedback that we hear a lot of is that people, again, it's that ignorance. People think that, well, it's my computer, it's my network,
Mm-hmm.
I can use it however I want to. What's it anyone else's business?
Yeah.
And there are people that actually believe that, and sadly, it's in industries that should know better. So,
Right.
we sort of started to target when we first got into the cybersecurity area. We was targeting risk averse industries, and what we found was that industries like legal and healthcare were amongst the worst in
Mm.
terms of the ignorance.
Wow.
And it's still that's still the case. It's still what we're finding, and it's more often than not, it is those C-level executives, and as we all know, it has to start from the top down,
Sure.
and that is they're usually the ones that get targeted in these
Yeah.
spear phishing attacks, and they often the biggest vulnerability in an organization
Yes.
because they just don't listen to anything when you try and explain it to them. So
Yeah,
yeah, so
we tend to say you can't teach an old dog new tricks. And so
that's right.
the approach to training the C-suite folks is obviously going to be very different, because we've got deep-seated and deep-rooted behaviors that now have to be unearthed and reshaped. It's almost easier to train the children. So how do we deal with these C-suite executives?
Yeah, look, and I had this. It may not be just the C-suite executives either,
Sure.
but I had a conversation with a lawyer that I
Mm.
know,
Mhm.
and she's a veteran in the industry, and she was saying she just laughed and she said, "Yeah, look, I know lawyers. I've known them for years. The problem is they're just arrogant and they think they
Mm.
know better."
Yeah, yeah. Well, they're gonna,
And
just ask a few of the seniors and lawyers and folks that are involved in some of these organizations that have been massively breached, and I wonder if there's a bit more humility floating about. You talked
yeah,
about healthcare. I mean, I'd be very interested to talk to the what do you call it, the National Health System in England.
yeah,
That got
yeah,
destroyed by the ransomware. I'd be very interested now to talk to the practitioners therein now post breach to see if that's had negative event but with positive effect on behavior.
Well, that's interesting because, and not too long ago here, there was a huge uproar and it got a lot of press because they implemented My Healthcare Record, which was a cloud-based system which kept all of our healthcare records, and we had an option to opt out if we wanted to by a certain period. And there was a lot of discussion around it, and a lot of fear. People saying, "Oh, it's not secure. It's in the cloud. What happens if it gets hacked?" And that was one of the arguments. I suppose the other one was that there was the information was more readily accessible by insurance companies, which could obviously lead to other implications. But with all the security discussions, it wasn't that. It was around the same time that I actually went to an osteo appointment, and I was lying there, and I had a look over while she was writing on her database or her computer system, whatever it was, patient healthcare record system, and I realized that she was using Windows XP, and I thought, well, this is the problem. People are pointing a finger at a cloud-based system, but the real security threats are practices that have practices that have old systems or bad processes or no processes around these sort of things, and there's always going to be a weakest link, and it's often not the one that we think.
Yeah, insider threat clearly is greater than we think, and you deal with organizational and other behaviors, at least in that part of your discipline and your background. And so I would imagine you're pretty familiar with the phishing attacks and sort of the social engineering and why it's so successful. Do you feel you have a mouthpiece or a place to kind of engage folks with those ideas as you go about speaking and various events?
Yeah, that's again a good question. I think I've spoken about cybersecurity for quite some time now, sure. and this I suppose new approach and new angle that I'm taking in the human behavioural side and cultural side is getting a lot more engagement and a lot more interest from people when I have a discussion. Sure. And I've been testing these sort of conversations when I go to like a networking events, things like that. And people are really wanting to talk about it. They find it fascinating, which I think is a great thing, because previously when I was just talking from a tech side or a traditional side of cybersecurity, people they want to talk about hacking, and that's really about it, because that's fascinating and yeah, and the stories are interesting, but that's about all, and after that they don't really do anything about it. I can entertain an entire room with stories about hacking, sure. and how it happens and the background of it, but it doesn't mean anyone's going to do anything about it.
Right. Well, and hacking begins with an idea and a behavior, and and so at its core, both the ideology of the adversary is an issue, and as you're advocating, there needs to be behavioral awareness and change among those of us that are practitioners.
And I think it's dangerous also to talk about hacking as much as we do, because again, it adds fuel to that idea that people have that it is all about hacking, and they have to protect themselves from the outside, and they don't actually look at the issues internally and the insider threats. So, and that's something that it's still falling a lot on deaf ears, because people just think, oh no, it's the hackers that we have to be scared of. Not the fact that I don't have a password or or I click on emails that I shouldn't be clicking on, those sort of things. Yeah, it's really a bit worrying.
It transcends ones and zeros and kind of behavioral change across the board. Where have you seen some early successes in turning the tide, Martin?
So I think what we've been looking at a few different platforms, education platforms, and I guess security awareness training, things like that. And we're finding that there's a lot more interest in that side of things. So whereas traditionally, we like I said before, we were looking at it from, okay, what areas can we secure, put in a firewall, we can improve Office 365 security scores, all these sort of technical side of things. But it was a very difficult sell to a lot of businesses, and we weren't getting that much interest. And interestingly enough, even there were businesses which had been breached that came to us, and we helped them around that breach that happened. In some cases, they even lost. There was a financial loss, and the uptake still wasn't there, and they just didn't do anything. They weren't as receptive as we thought they'd be in terms of changing, changing things. And again, once we dug a little bit deeper, we found that it's just because they just don't understand, and they have this blind faith in technology and technology providers, thinking that once we've been engaged, well, we're just going to fix it, and they're never going to have a problem again. So these ones have been a bit of a challenge, but what we've found is that the security awareness training has been really good, because it's a little bit of fun. It's something a bit different. It was easier to get someone in the organisation like a champion or champions to drive it from the inside, and just ensure that the staff were starting to do these things and do this training and do these little there, in some cases there's games, some cases there's videos, but it's engaging, and it's getting the message across more effectively than just us sitting there and preaching to them.
Sure. Well, the reality is too, in the business communities and other places, it's still going to be difficult to convince people to pay attention to something that isn't producing or making widgets. They're spending money in a profit loss area. And hopefully, though, they can embrace the importance before they learn the hard way through a loss. Ladies and gentlemen, we've had the privilege of having Mr. Martin Haak with us from Australia. He is the founder of Infinite Edge. He's a strategist, he is a speaker, and he is really an evangelist for addressing the behavior component inside the technology industry, and how his desire to move people to awareness. And I wish you the best there in Australia, and I definitely want to hope and pray that we see also reap the benefits from your work and research over here in the middle of summer here in the United States. Pleasure to have you, Martin.
Thanks for having me, Abe.
Indeed. This is Abe Thompson on the new Cyber Frontier, signing out from the Secure Set Studios here in Colorado Springs. Thank you and goodbye.
We hope you have enjoyed this episode of New Cyber Frontier. Remember, please follow and participate, as New Cyber Frontier is supporting a grassroots community effort to empower the individual in the digital age. Check it out at privacyforthepeople.org. Also, make sure to join our mailing list so we can keep you informed. If you have an idea, if you have a question you would like to hear answered, or if you just want to get involved in what we're doing, reach out to us at newcyberfrontier.com. We also encourage you to visit our sponsors links, because they are the ones that really make this show possible. We look forward to seeing you on the next episode of New Cyber Frontier.